Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Stephen Cota. I'm a program manager with the Innovation Task Force. Let's not do that right off the bat. And on behalf of the ITF, we want to thank you all for coming. This is actually our first in-person event since 2019. So we're really excited to see you all in person. So thank you for making the time. We also want to extend a thank you and welcome to those of you who are watching on our YouTube channel. We appreciate you guys taking the time as well to be with us today. If you have a question for us during the event, feel free to email it to idea@tsa.dhs.gov, and we will do our best to answer it during the event or get you an answer through email. Real quick, before we get into the today's agenda, some logistics for the building. The cafeteria is down to your left. Bathrooms are around the corner, or there are additional bathrooms if you go all the way down to the other side of the building. We do have one break, I believe at 12:40. So if you guys want to go over and get coffee, get water, and if you obviously have any questions, let us know. All right, so we will get into it. So we have you guys for 3 hours today. So we'll do our best to stay on time. So we'll just go to the agenda real quick. All right, so first we're going to start with some introductions into capability management and innovation. We're then going to follow that up with some information overview in the Innovation Task Force. From there, we will get into the broad agency announcement. We'll then have some information on the demonstration lifecycle and for those vendors who are selected, what to expect during a demonstration. We also have some of our support stakeholders here to give you guys some information on the lab and what goes on there. And then after that, we have some fireside chats. So we are fortunate to have our Chief Innovation Officer with us this afternoon, as well as Karen Burke, the FSD for the state of Nevada. So with that, I will hand it over to Melissa Conley, the Executive Director for CM&I.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Coda, for that great intro. This team always does such a great job with these events. I love all of the handouts that you guys printed out, the purple, everything. It's just so amazing. So thanks again for joining. You know, this is a really great turnout for our first in-person event since 2019. And so thanks to everyone who's also joined online. We're just really excited for today. So our boss, Austin Gould, he was going to open for us, but he got caught up in the administrator's daily. And so fair warning, he may be popping in to say hello. He's you won't miss him when he walks in the door. I think you guys are all familiar with him. So the team wanted me to start with an intro to our division, the Capability Management and Innovation Division. So my name is Melissa Conley. I am the executive director for that division. And so we're most recently back, all of us are back in our positions. We've all been acting, as Stacy's been the deputy for TSA. Austin popped up to fill Stacy's shoes, and then Keith popped into Austin's role, and then I was acting deputy. But most recently, everyone's kind of moved back to their roles, and so we're really happy about that. And so I'm back in my executive director role. Matt is back in his ITF role, and I feel like we're all where we belong. So the division is made up of the Innovation Task Force. We've got capability managers across each segment of screening. We've got a multimodal branch that's really focused on surface and cargo technologies. And they also do CUAS. And so they cycle technologies through test beds and then publish these catalogs for external parties to buy. And so that's just a little bit different than what we do on the CM side of the house, where we do the development of the technology, and then we transition to APM for procurement and deployment. So next slide. Our core mission in CM&I is to develop the material and the non-material solutions for the agency. We publish roadmaps. We are the lead business authority for the agency, meaning that we are the user rep. We spend a lot of time in the field understanding the technology, understanding the capability gaps. Our job doesn't end with requirements and development. We are often back in the field, once that technology is deployed, trying to mitigate any issues, understanding what the training issues are, understanding anything that we didn't catch during that development cycle. And so we're really plugged in through that entire life cycle of the technology. And so, it's really important. The capability managers, as well as, other parts of TSA, really use the ITF process to help solve some of these, big challenges that we have here at TSA, and we've got plenty. I mean, we had record-breaking volumes this past summer. I think we did 2.8 million passengers in one day across 400, I think we're at 430 airports. We've got 50,000 officers, and so you can imagine the type of operational problems that we're faced with day to day. So I just want to say, thanks again for your participation. The CM&I team really leverages the ITF process to kind of source out, our capability gaps and some of the biggest challenges. And so we're really looking forward to today. Matt got a great presentation on how to get involved. And if you go to the next slide, I'm pretty sure we're going to give this to everybody to take home. Yeah, okay, I'm getting a yes. If you've got any questions for CM&I, we've got mailboxes. Wendy, my deputy, and we're always available to take calls, go to meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So please reach out if you've got any questions after this. But with that being said, Mr. Matt, I will turn it over to you for the rest of the day. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Melissa, very much. Great context and kind of overview of where we fit as ITF in the organization. I'm excited to be here and give you guys kind of a little bit of a rundown of what the task force looks like these days. We go forward, I think, in slides. So ITF was founded in 2016 at a time in which we were, as an agency, being relatively reactive to the marketplace and to the need. And along the time frame that ITF stood up, a year or so later, we formed the RCA that Melissa just talked about and got all the capability managers up to speed. What that did for TSA was provided a user rep and an advocate on the front end of the process of acquisition of capability. And as Melissa talked about, they look across the broad scope of material and non-material solutions. ITF has a niche inside of that to demonstrate in an operational environment operationally relevant solutions as fast as possible. we try and take an idea from problem statement or need into physical demonstration if we can in 6 months. And we've been pretty good at it over the last few years. About 3 years ago, we kind of moved into phase 2 of ITF, if you will, and introduced an updated innovation lifecycle that has a non-linear, multi kind of phased approach that allows us to execute in multiple different pieces of the innovation process at the same time, and talk about kind of how we structure and do that in a repeatable way. We were codified in 2018 in the FAA Reauthorization Act as having to perform those specific tasks outlined there on the slide by Congress. And so it's nice to have that congressional coverage and mandate to do the work that we're doing, but it's not possible without industry partners like you guys. And so we really depend on you guys to look at the broad agency announcement, the problem statements and focus areas that we have to help fuel the solutions that we're able to use and demonstrate. Next slide. This is what that life cycle looks like if you haven't seen it. We kind of start at the top left corner, Aspire, and that starts with our Chief Innovation Officer and our administrator giving us kind of the moon to shoot for. It's the aspiration and the starting point of what are the really hard problems that we should be solving? What are the things that are really tangible that can be made a difference? And we update those every couple of years to give us that kind of aspirational vision. We'll talk more later as a fireside chat with our Chief Innovation Officer. Excited to have him here. Thanks, Stephen. We'll move into the discover phase where we work to collect problems from across the agency. And for us, it's really important as innovators to get out of the constraints of solutions and into the operational need. What is the problem that we're having? And without looking at how we solve it, better understanding the complexity of that problem. We have a problem statement owner that will then come forward and discuss that problem to our Discover panel, which is composed of senior executives across TSA. It's an opportunity for those executives to get awareness of what that problem is, but also provide us input about the prioritization of those problems and where they rack and stack in the funding. Because one of the things we want to keep an eye on is scale, right? How do we take the momentum that we create from an innovation project and make it an enterprise capability? So that discover phase is relatively new. We've done 2 of them, had one a couple of weeks ago, really successful in terms of how we're able to get more engagement across the agency and buy into the problems that we're trying to solve. Those feed into a select phase, which in the older version of ITF meant we would put it out on a BAA. In the newer version of ITF, we have a large set of innovation channels that we work across. We work with Silicon Valley Innovation Program, Incatel, the other kind of HS Works and Defense Works. We work with centers of excellence that S&T maintains, as well as other kind of innovative counterparts and partners across the government. We also continue to do our broad agency announcement, thus the Industry Day today. And so that's the kind of main vehicle for industry intake, but we work across those channels and try and marry the problems up to the most appropriate channel to find a solution. Once we go through select phase, the core bread and butter of ITF is demonstration. The lifeblood of what we do is getting it out into the user environment. TSA has an extremely robust testing process for our acquisition programs. And what we try and do is find as many ways to characterize those capabilities for performance in the lab setting as fast as we can from an assessment perspective so that we can get it in user hands. Because at that intersection of passenger, officer, and equipment or solution is where we're able to derive the most lessons learned and get that human factors kind of feel for how is that solution going to work. And from an industry perspective, it's an opportunity to get you to see those solutions in action, better understand our mission space, and better tailor your solution to meet the needs as we go forward. We move into scale where we try and identify off-ramps for those solutions, whether it be working with airport partners that are adjacent to our process to be able to help us implement those solutions along the passenger journey, or TSA getting them as requirements and putting them into the acquisition process. We kind of pull across those spaces. And then mobilize is our culture of innovation, risk-taking, failing forward, failing fast, and learning from those failures so that we can implement and iterate into a better process and better view. Next slide. These are some of the partners I was talking about that we can't do this without. Beyond industry, we also have our government partners that we work closely with, some of the national labs that we work closely with for their expertise and knowledge. And then we've got 18 airports that are our innovation airports. Those are our kind of hubs of innovation in the field that allow us to have a quick loading dock, if you will, literally in place to be able to take equipment and solutions out to the field. Those partners you'll hear from with FSD Burke later today Thanks for being here. And we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that partnership that exists between the airport itself, the local TSA, and the headquarters. And then we've got international partnerships that are fantastic. Information sharing across the spectrum of regulators, operators in the airline space and airport spaces as well. Next slide. With that, I'm going to toss it back over to Mr. Koda to get you guys into the core of the industry day. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to be here physically and online. Like I said, we can't do this work without your input and your solutions. So really appreciate your time and effort towards this. Thanks.
All right, real quick, because I'm seeing a lot of people take pictures of slides, which are great. But just so you guys know, these will be posted on the tsa.gov/ITF webpage after today's event. The video recording will also be posted on the YouTube channel as well. So if you guys don't want to take pictures in a lot of time, you guys can grab the slides later this afternoon. Okay, so I'm going to share some information regarding our most recent BAA. So we go to the next slide. All right, so the BAA is our traditional contract solicitation for working with industry to identify new and emerging capabilities for demonstration in the field. Our first BAA was all the way back in 2016. We are now on our 7th cohort. Technically, it's BAA 6. We have 2 different cutoffs. Regardless of the problem statements that we put out, regardless when in time we put them out, we always make sure that the problem statements and what we're looking for adhere to those things that you see on the screen, right? So we always make sure that they adhere to our TSA mission. They're looking to drive us and propel us forward, making us more effective, more efficient, driving the passenger experience. Go to the next slide. One of the things that is new for us, and if you look towards the bottom, right, you see the life cycle from the vendor's perspective of, how do I engage? How do I submit? And then once I submit, what does ITF do with the white paper, right? So once we have a BAA that's posted, we go out and we solicit industry to make them aware that we have a BAA posted, which sometimes is more difficult to do. But we go to industry exchange events. We leverage our social media, we leverage our newsletter. From there, hopefully we get in a good, robust cohort of submissions for us to review. And then there it starts our intake process, right? So we have 3 phases. The first phase is we have an ITF initial review. So we have program managers who actually go out and facilitate and implement the demonstrations. They will look at your white papers and they will make sure that what we're pushing forward for down select are things that we can physically demonstrate, right? From there, we go into a technical review. So we have subject matter experts from across TSA who have ownership of that capability space to review and provide their feedback. And they're the ones who say, these are the things that should be demonstrated, right? And then from there, we down select even further, and then we go to the vendor pitch. So the vendor pitch, we have the senior executives or the leadership from the subject matter experts that we leverage for the technical review. So essentially their bosses will come and vendors who are selected for vendor pitch can either come in person or they can hop on a VTC and they provide us more information on their proposal. Usually they provide, additional con-ops, additional use cases, additional things that, may not have been included in the initial white paper. And then directly following the vendor pitch, everyone hangs up and then we vote. And then from there, the senior executive service members, they're the ones who say, okay, these are the things that will be demonstrated, right? And then from there, we get into selection for demo. And we go to the next slide. One of the things that is new for us is we typically put out problem statements, right? So we usually put out pretty specific, pre-targeted problem statements. The past 2 BAA cycles that we've had have been really more so focused on cybersecurity and IT. The one that was 2 cycles ago also had some COVID-19, some thermal imaging and safe distance screening, things of that nature. But we've had 2 BAA cycles now where we've really been focusing in on the cybersecurity space. And so there's been a decent amount of time. And so we're excited that we came up with problem focus areas. We essentially want to see kind of anything and everything, right? So if it touches upon security effectiveness, screening efficiency, the traveler experience, we also have a focus area here. So if you have a solution that may be a little bit more advanced on the TRL scale, and it may be something that would apply to the innovation checkpoint out at Harry Reid Las Vegas International Airport, we have a focus area for that. And then we also have a focus area that's specific to regulatory and compliance. So we were excited that we were able to get that in there. And we do have some examples in here, but again, do not feel constrained by these examples. If you're a vendor and you have something that doesn't, get a call out here, don't be discouraged. Please feel free to still submit to us. Love to see it. All right, next slide. All right, some best practices for the submissions, and a lot of this stuff is common sense, but sometimes, we know how difficult it is and how busy folks are, so we just wanted to hit some of these things. So the first thing is make sure that you address all of the questions that are asked in the solicitation in your white paper. So make sure that you select the appropriate focus area or problem statement. Make sure you include the rough order of magnitude attachment. Make sure you guys have everything that is asked for in there. 'Cause sometimes, again, unfortunately, once the solicitation closes and we get your submission to us, if there is something that's missing, unfortunately, we're not able to reach back out and just do a simple, hey, you were missing your focus area. Can you just tell us which one it is, and we can go back and check. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that. So it's just super important to make sure you take the time and make sure everything's selected. The next one is understanding the ITF demonstrations. And so we have our branch manager, Christina Peach, who's over demonstration management execution, who's going to go over what it is to partner with ITF and facilitate a demonstration. And so having that information will help you guys as you're filling out your white paper submission, as you're looking at developing the ConOps, being able to tie and make the connection for us on the use case. Sometimes if it's a capability that we've never seen before, sometimes it can get a little confusing when we're trying to figure out, how could we use this? And so to the extent in which the vendor can help us, understand that would be great. Making sure all of your registrations, all of your, your DUNS number and all of those things are up and current on sam.gov. And then I would say the other big thing is take advantage of the open question period that we have. I think the questions that we have, it says it in the solicitation, but I think you're able to submit questions up until 2 weeks prior to the cutoff date. So the next cutoff date is October 17th. So I think, October 1st or, around that time is when you guys can still take the time to ask questions. So, okay. I know there's a lot of information, and we're doing this for you guys, right? So if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to ask them live time. Don't, feel like you guys have to wait till later in the afternoon. All right. So with that, I'll hand it over to Christina Peach. Thanks, Christina.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Christina Peach. I'm the branch manager for the Demonstration Management and Execution branch within the Innovation Task Force. And today, it's been hit on a couple times, but want to really talk about the demonstration lifecycle that we follow for all the ITF demonstrations. Next slide. So down the left side of the slide, it starts with cohorted orientation or initiation. And that's what we've largely heard about so far this morning. So the broad agency announcement, of course, is one of the bigger pieces to that. But there are also several other ways that demonstrations kind of end up in the DMX space. Things like partnerships with our DHS S&T partners, cooperative research and development agreements, things of that nature. And ultimately it gets to that selection phase. So in the selection phase, once we have that, it's the handoff point. So the strategy and engagement piece, they have done everything that, again, has been talked about today. And then they hand it over to us. And so what do we do with it? We've got all the right paperwork now, and it's time to get started. It starts in pre-demonstration. This definitely takes the longest amount of time. It requires the most amount of documentation for the demo specifically, and it's critical to the overall success of the demonstration. So really everything gets done in this phase is kind of what I'm saying. The kickoff point that some of you may be familiar with is the vendor kickoff. This is really the starting point for the DMX program managers, and our great DMX PMs are in the room here today across the front. So say hi to everybody. So they start the vendor kickoff, and what that means is they're going to get the kind of baseline information that they need to start framing. What are we doing with this demo? What's the right use case for our mission space? They need things like non-disclosure agreements. SSI training has to be completed. There are vetting requirements. So all of this is kind of included in that vendor kickoff phase. And one point I'll mention on that, going to the actual documentation, is, there are forms, DHS, TSA forms. We have templates that have been really kind of meticulously crafted, if you will, and approved by folks like Chief Counsel, our IT people, contracting and procurement. So all of those templates have all the right information for what's needed for our demonstration purposes. So that comes to you if you're selected in a package. Within the package, you can use those templates to help cut down on the time that's needed to develop documents because we've already developed them for you. So it's more of look at, review, make sure you understand all the information, ask the questions if you don't. If you need help with anything, let us know. But then ultimately get those signed back to us, and we ask for those within 10 days. And of course, Austin walks in when it's my turn to talk. So come up and say hi, or you want me to talk?
Just keep rolling.
We gave you
All right.
fair
Keep going.
Yeah, we did give
I'll
a
wait
fair
till there's
warning.
a natural break.
All right, so after, again, with those templates, after that's collected, this is also the time where the program managers are going to ask you for things like the training manuals, the operator manuals, the configuration documentation, configuration management. If it's a software solution or has software components, this is where we're going to ask for, those system architecture designs. Again, all of that really being critical to how we frame out the rest of the demonstration. Once all of that is in place, goes over to standing up the integrated project team. Again, another really key piece of this planning phase is pulling in the right subject matter experts from across the agency that have a stake in this demonstration or really a critical piece to support us throughout the demonstration. This is where a lot of the stuff like the concept for operations or the ConOps, demonstration plans, data collection plans, human factors data collection plans, test plans, assessment plans, all of this is really starting to be developed in this phase and largely in part in consultation with that IPT and those subject matter experts to make sure that we really have the right framework in place to move forward. And then another key piece is where are we going to do this? So we have lab facilities, we have innovation sites. So thinking about our labs, we have the Transportation Security Lab that's in Atlantic City. We have the TSA Systems Integration Facility, which is just outside of TCA. And then, as Matt mentioned, we have our innovation sites that, they've applied through the ITF process and been selected based on not only local TSA, but the airport authority's commitment to demonstrating innovative technologies. So the PMs have to think of all of these different pieces. What is right? And there's no one size fits all. So every solution could be different, and it is different. We've seen, some of the solutions, we can go right into the TSIF, we can get the assessments done, and then we can move to an airport. Sometimes we have to go to the TSL. And then if we are successful with the TSL, then we move to the TSIF, then we move to an airport. Maybe some things we just go straight to an airport. So again, in this phase, when I say it takes the longest, it really does take several months to get through this because everything that's done in this phase is what sets us up for the execution piece. So the demo management, that's kind of what we're talking about now, right? The demonstration management piece of DMX. And a couple other things that I want to point out, and on the right side of the slide under solution readiness, there are two things with an asterisk. All of the work that the PMs do kind of culminate into these readiness reviews. The first one being solution provider readiness review, and then the second one is assessment readiness review. And why these are important is there's obviously criteria that goes into it, a lot of what I just mentioned before, but the program manager has to go through, ensure they've got everything, and then they actually develop a briefing that's presented to the leadership team for approval. They have to get that approval to move into the next step or the next phase of the demonstration. And that's critical, again, to make sure that we stay on time, we stay on schedule. So in that solution provider readiness review, and why it's important to get those templates and initial documents back to us is that's really the first thing. If we don't have that, then the rest of the stuff can't happen. So if you think of them as toll gates, then you get to the assessment readiness review piece. At the assessment readiness review, that's, do we have the IPT set up? Have we identified the risks, potential mitigations? Do we have the contracting pieces in place? The PR packages submitted? Do we have the draft test plans? So program managers, again, great job. You guys do this incredibly well. I know it looks like a lot, but they just cruise through it. So with all of those things, they get the approval. So moving from, we've got all the planning, we've got everything in place, we've got the right people involved, we've got our draft. Then we move into that demonstration phase. In the demonstration phase, again, you'll see the demonstration readiness review with an asterisk next to it. That is, are we fully ready? Do we have finalized training, finalized procedures, finalized CONOPS, test plans, all of those things? Are they final? Are they approved by the IPT? Are they approved by leadership? This is how we're going to execute. If there are any infrastructure needs at the airport, are those done? Is it ready? Is the airport ready to accept the technology? Can it be installed? This again, presented by the program managers to the leadership team. Once given approval, then we get to the execution piece. So a lot of work goes before we get to actually put this thing in an airport. And those timelines, they just vary depending on the solution of how long that takes. But the execution phase is, okay, great. Let's install it. Let's train the officers and let's get this thing going. So then all the data is collected at either the airport or in some cases in the lab. We collect all of the data that's across cybersecurity assessments. There's human factors data collection, operational data collection, and that goes on typically for about 45 days in the airport environment. Again, just kind of depending on the solution. But all of that information is taken from that execution piece, and that's what is used to kind of move us into that post-demonstration phase. So post-demonstration is, okay, what have we learned? Collect all of that information. Let's get all the final reports from the data collection. Let's make our analysis and then ultimately go into the closeout briefing. So we do take all the information and prepare plenty of documents, as the team can attest to, in support of this closeout, but it's presented to a steering committee. And in the steering committee, we make a recommendation based on the demo results. Along the bottom right side, you'll see there are a couple of categories there. That's typically where the ITF demonstrations end up, not at this time. And that simply means either our focus has shifted or for whatever other reason, we're just not interested in pursuing the solution further. Then requires additional research and development. That just means we will transition it. It shows promise. However, it just needs a little bit more development before it would be really applicable writ large across CSA. And then there's procure and acquire. These are similar, just in kind of simplest terms. I'll say procure is maybe we need one of them, maybe we need two of them, and it's cost. We can just go out and make that happen. Where acquire is we're really entering it into the acquisition lifecycle framework for the larger APM-based efforts. And there's one new one there that I'll kind of call out. We call it SEAA. It's SSEAA. It stands for Supplemental Solutions for External Adoption and Acquisition. One of the things that we've seen kind of recently is a lot of the things that have came in through the BAA or some of our other intake avenues are the same things that airports and airlines are looking at. It's the same technology, maybe a slightly different use case. But what we decided to do was create this, I'll say new bucket or new category at the end. And it's for those types of things. So a good example of that would be real-time wait time technology, customer movement analytics. As we see those things, we're going out, we're demonstrating them. But this is our way to share that with our industry partners so that they have the information and maybe save them a bit of time or help inform their decision making. At the closeout, the program manager will develop the kind of that package, and it'll be posted on the Homeland Security Information Network or HISN platform, which airport authorities and others can get access to, as well as kind of folded into some of the existing ITF documents like yearbooks or the ITF catalog. And with that, that closes out the demonstration piece of it. But what I would like to also highlight a couple key things as far as best practices or things to think about. You know, Steve kind of hit on for the broad agency announcement. Here are the really important pieces and things that we need. The same thing applies in the demo part of this, one of which being the TRL. So everything is about timing. Everything in that DMX life cycle is about timing. So the TRL is really, really important, so much so that we recently added it to the broad agency announcement. It is a question, what is the TRL level of your solution? And additionally, there's another question that asks, are you ready to demonstrate in 6 months? Again, the speed, critically important. So being accurate with the TRL level is incredibly helpful because we are going in that we're going to get there in 6 months. That's how we start planning. So we don't want to get into it and then find out, oh, we're not going to be ready for 10 months or the solution may not be ready for a year, because it's not that we're not interested in lower TRL solutions. We just have to adjust our planning for that. So it's really, really important to get us that information up front. And kind of tied to that, if you will, is I'll say any partnerships or FedRAMP certifications. We have seen a shift to kind of all things cloud-based. Everything is cloud-based. All the solutions have some component. They need connectivity. So with that, if you have FedRAMP certification, let us know that in that BAA submission. Give us that information as soon as possible. If you have other IT certifications, again, let us know sooner rather than later. We've seen things like third-party algorithms. Obviously, TSA is very interested in that at this point. So as those come in, a really key piece of information associated with that is, does it have to go on a CT? Is it on a CT that's already in our mission space? Is it one of the existing vendors? If so, do you have a partnership with them? Do you already have some kind of established relationship? Or does one need to be created if you're selected? All of those things, again, are just really, really critical to making sure not only do we pull the right people into the demonstration planning and into the IPTs, again, but for the timeline and the sake of how long the demonstration is going to last and how long we need to dedicate resources to it. With that, I'm going to take a break because I need a drink, and I'm going to hand it over to Lewis. Yeah, I know. Well, just water for now, but so as a part of the demonstration.
Hang on. Before you hand over to Lewis, let me get my 2 cents. All right.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
There
Sorry, man. Hey, everybody. Austin Gould with TSA. I'm the Assistant Administrator for Requirements and Capabilities Analysis. I really just wanted to say thank you for coming today and showing interest in what we have going on here at TSA. I think that what we do in RCA is really, really exciting work. Whenever I address a group like this, I always want to lay the framework. Make no mistake about it, the threat is still out there. I get to see all the intel regarding threats to the nation, particularly the transportation system, and our adversaries are still very, very focused on transportation as a potential attack vector. And that goes across everything, kinetic, cyber, you name it. So the threat's out there. So the interest that you have in helping TSA solve what really is our prime mission, our security mission, is truly, truly appreciated. But if you saw the BAA, I call them buckets, problem areas, whatever we call them. There's also some in there, one particular on customer experience. So this administration in particular has been very in tune with customer experience. And there's an executive order out there. If you haven't seen it, you can look it up. And TSA is by named in there. And we're supposed to look at every one of our transactions with the public and streamline them and make them as seamless as possible for the traveling public. And it's something we take very seriously at TSA, because while our primary mission is security, and don't lose sight of that, getting through the people through the checkpoint a little bit more easily, less friction, it's in everybody's best interest. And then, we firmly believe that a happy passenger and an informed passenger is a much more compliant passenger during the security process. And then they're in a much better mood to spend money on the airport side of things once they get through the checkpoint. And it all adds up to a much more beneficial experience for everybody. So that's why customer experience is still really, really important for us. I love what the Innovation Task Force does here. Know a lot of faces in the room, and it's so good to see you all again. But for those of you who maybe haven't dealt with TSA before, dealt with the government maybe before, I acknowledge it can be just confounding. And for those of you that are kind of cross-cutting between different organizations in the government, we do things one way. I'm a 30-year Coast Guard guy. The Coast Guard does things a little bit different. CBP tends to do whatever they want. So you add all that together, and it can be really, really challenging for dealing with the government. So this kind of exchange, it'll let you know how to crack the books on TSA and how to get in there and how to engage with us. And this gives you a very collaborative forum to ask your questions, understand what we're all about, get a feel for what we're after, and then your submissions to this BAA will be that much better. So please use this as the opportunity that it really, really is. I tell people all the time, I love my time in the Coast Guard. I ran the R&D program there for 4 years. I wish that I had had an ITF, and I wish that I could have gotten the R&D folks interested in this kind of pull for tangible things that we could test and then use for requirement development and then move on from there. We just didn't have it, and I couldn't get them off the top dead center to set it up. As you think about what you're going to submit and how you're going to submit it, Peach alluded to it before. I don't know if there's going to be more discussion about this later on in the presentation. We have a heck of a time with transition here, okay? We're going to get great ideas from you all. It's going to be stuff that generates a lot of enthusiasm. You're going to turn around and say, okay, when are you going to order something? We're going to turn around and go, okay, where's the money? And then we're going to fall in the federal budget cycle where it's like a 3-year thing. So figuring out how to transition and being creative in that regard, maybe staying engaged, in the interim to make things happen is something that we really focus on here at TSA. It's something that we have not quite cracked the code on. And just as the discussion goes out, I'm sure there'll be more talk about transition. Ask the questions, and if you have any input that we could consider, please do provide it. And then the last thing I'll say before we turn it over to Lewis. Who here has heard of the GBEF, Government Business Executive Forum? We got a few hands. If you're not familiar with it, look it up, okay? This is just a public service announcement on behalf of a government executive who, quite frankly, finds that a very useful forum to communicate with industry. I don't know how they're organized. There's a few people here. Ian, give a wave. Ian's very active with it over there. But they coordinate speaking events that are local here in DC. They run a couple of conferences every year called EDGE. They seem to attract the right level of government people with the right level of industry people. Their content is really, really good. And the reason why I see so many familiar faces in the room is because I go to those events pretty regularly, along with my peers from the interagency. And they get heavy hitters from CISA, from CBP, from you name it, across the federal government. So I throw that out just to consider that. If you want to continue a relationship, Homeland Security oriented, a lot of it's IT oriented, quite frankly. But if you're interested in that line of work, look it up and think about it, okay? That's all I got. I'm going to step out again, and Peach, I'll turn it over to you to introduce Lewis. All right?
Well, I'm done. So now I'm really just going to turn it over to Lewis. But again, kind of coming back to the demonstration life cycle, we need some agreements to be able to do all of this work. So I'll turn it over to Lewis, and he's actually going to talk about some of those agreements that we leverage for DMX.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lewis Fletcher, and as you heard, I am a PM in DMX as well. And I'm going to be talking to you about your favorite subject, contract vehicles. So we all know there's a ton of strategies out there, multiple different types of contract vehicles, but DMX uses 2 in particular. One is the Bellman Agreement. It's a standalone Bellman Agreement. And I'm sure many of you have probably used this contract vehicle before with the government. But for those that have not, this agreement does not have any funds obligated to it. However, it does permit TSA, DMX in particular, to take possession of the solution that you submitted. And we use this within a finite time frame. And of course, that time frame is prescribed within that Bellman Agreement. But it also identifies the property value. So the value of the property is the estimated value that the equipment that you provide to TSA. And this also includes the parts, the software, the delivery, as well as the government's acceptance in consideration of that particular solution. The other vehicle that we use is OTAs, which are other transaction agreements. I don't know if that's a common thing within industry, but we recently started using OTAs, and that was because of some feedback that was received from industry during our recent assessment of our organization. OTAs is an avenue for TSA to support key functions of the solution being demonstrated. And it also gives us the ability to associate funds with it compared to a standalone bailment. OTAs also focus on, our OTAs focus on the demonstration lifecycle that you just recently heard about from Christina Peach. And so within our OTAs, we also leverage a percentage of, I'm sure you're familiar with this term, independent government cost estimate, also known as IGCEs. What we do is we take the ROM that Steve Coda talked about that you submit during your BAA submission process. That ROM helps us develop the IGCE, as well as creating the OTAs and the standalone bailments. It is important to know that OTAs or bailments are not procurement contracts. They're not grants. They're not cooperative agreements. They are used to support the TSA innovation space, since we do not manufacture or develop screening equipment. However, if you do go into an OTA with us, unlike a bailment would just be a simple standalone bailment. When we execute an OTA, it will include a bailment agreement in it, mainly because we need to be able to take possession of the solution that you're providing. As you heard earlier from Steve about required documentation for the BAA submission, there are a few steps in our process that are tied into the demonstration lifecycle. First, you must meet eligibility criteria. What does that mean? So you must submit, as you heard, a BAA, including your white paper, with all the required documentation. That's step one. Oh, that's part of step one. You must conduct your vendor pitch, and finally receive approval from TSA to demonstrate and submit a solution. Secondly, an agreement, which I just went over the development in the OTA, is executed, and it has to be signed by both parties, the government, including the vendor. And that signifies that you have met the goals and mission of TSA. And this will allow us, ITF, to support you in the execution of the demonstration, which includes installation, should it need to be installed somewhere, lab or airport. It also includes the testing that we have to do, as you heard, the rigorous multiple assessments that we have to do with the solution. And it also includes the training. So when the solution is installed either at the lab or particularly at the airport, there are training documents that are generated and are required. So that's why we ask you for training manuals that you may have. That definitely helps us create what our SOPs and ConOps so that we can get the field trained up and able to use the solution. That definitely cuts down on some of the time when the solution is demonstrated live. Finally, it's important to inform you that in OTA and bailment, within OTA and bailment, we are not purchasing your solution. Again, we're taking it for a finite amount of time. And once the agreement is finalized, which is also included in the OTA or bailment, usually we'll take it from a year to 2 years. We will give you back everything. We ask that you, we will coordinate with you if it's installed, to get it uninstalled, to have it shipped back to where it needs to be shipped back. If it's in the lab, we will work with the lab for you to come and get it. But we will not keep anything. The only thing we keep is the results, and those things are also shared with you. So I don't really have anything else to add when it comes to agreements. At the end of the day, the BA submission is important that you submit all the documents that we're asking for. That definitely helps us create the contractual requirement documents that we have to do. It just makes the process easier. So whatever you can provide in the beginning, the ROM, any cost associated with your solution, it helps us create or move that process along when it comes to contracting. And I'm sure those of you that have worked with contracts know that that process can be very lengthy. So whatever can be done to shorten that, it will just push the demonstration further along the timeline. So I will transition this over to Xavier. He's also a program manager within ITF.
Good morning, everybody. Excuse me. My name is Xavier Davis with the Innovation Task Force. And one of my primary roles within ITF, excuse me, is to provide support for our cybersecurity and IT aspects of the demonstrations that are led by our wonderful PMs over here in the demonstration branch. And in doing so, we do work closely with our IT counterparts within the Information Assurance and Cybersecurity Division, otherwise known as IAD. And we work with them to help us determine the depth of the cybersecurity assessment that will need to be performed against your solution, your software solution, during the demonstration. Now, as a cybersecurity professional myself, I must say that, while we collaborate with you to work through your software solution in our demonstration, we also need to ensure that we do minimize the amount of risk that is introduced to the TSA environment and maintain the TSA security posture throughout the demonstration. So with that, I'll just be talking to you today about the software solutions and what you need to know. As you can see up here on this slide, starting off with CyberScan. We will conduct vulnerability scans against your software solution just to at least see where your software solution stands initially and see if there's any recommendations we need to give you before proceeding to a field demonstration with your solution. Next, we may or may not need to do a physical security assessment against your software solution. It really depends on if your solution is incorporated with some type of hardware or multiple pieces of hardware or TSE for that matter. Next, we'll cover some lessons learned. One of them is ensuring that your software is ready for demonstration. An example is you have an underlying operating system, that your software solution runs with. If it's end of life or nearing end of life, we highly recommend that you upgrade that operating system to a more current version. And if you do have a current operating system that you're using, please just apply any necessary or current security patches or updates that are available to reduce the amount of vulnerabilities or the risk that can be exposed in the TSA environment. Another lesson learned that we would like to cover Lewis mentioned all the documents that you're required to submit within the BAA. Please include as much technical information as you possibly can with your documents, to include network diagrams. That really helps us to determine the depth of the cybersecurity assessment, and it also helps the program manager to determine the depth of the scope of the demonstration that will need to be executed against with your solution. Also, if your software solution is a cloud-based, FedRAMP authorization is required to do a full scope of the demonstration, where TSA data is concerned. What that means is if you're not FedRAMP authorized, it can limit the scope of your demonstration where TSA data is concerned, regardless of the data that you need to perform the solution is sensitive data or non-sensitive data. Next slide, please. Here we're going to talk about the IT cybersecurity requirements. You see at the top there, we begin with the FISMA. This is the overarching cybersecurity requirement that directs all federal agencies, including TSA. And it sets the tone for the cybersecurity requirements that are required by us. Saying that to say, in the long term, for a long-term partnership with TSA beyond your demonstration, if you make it past the demonstration, this is really good for you to have met all of these cybersecurity requirements, because you'll need to meet them in order to have a long-term partnership with TSA beyond the demonstration. And all these are other policies and directives listed below that help us to meet that requirement that the FISMA has set forth. Next slide, please. Next thing is our cybersecurity demo process and requirements. Here we work with our the program managers during the initial planning for the demonstration. And we'll begin by one of the documents that you're required to fill out and sign up on, which is our data protection plan. The data protection plan pretty much details the processes and the procedures that you'll be required to safeguard our data. That you'll be required to safeguard the TSA data, regardless of whether the data is sensitive in nature or non-sensitive. And during this initial planning and the demonstration, we also will work with, again, IAD to request a cybersecurity assessment. And during this request, we'll also discuss the depth of the cybersecurity assessment that's needed. And the cybersecurity assessment really depends on the full scope of the demonstration itself. And during the planning, we'll talk about doing a pre-assessment, which is pretty much done on paper, and having some conversations with you, where we have you fill out a limited scope questionnaire and ask certain questions like, is your software solution require PII or any SSI? Do you require external network communications, or will it only require an internal network communications? As well as, is this demonstration going to be required public facing, or is it publicly accessible? These are some of the things that are the Information Assurance and Cybersecurity Division is going to need to know as we do your pre-assessment. They'll also need to have some technical information, or require some technical information from you in their data call or technical sheet, which includes if you're using a web application within your demonstration, if there are any database servers that you need to use during your demonstration, any OS versions that are required if you have multiple systems that comprising your software solution, mobile apps, ports and protocols need to communicate internally with your software solution if there's multiple systems. And we'll finally move around to the post-assessment after the cyber assessment is done and we've determined the depth of the cyber assessment. And we'll have a conversation with you along with the program manager that's leading the demonstration to go over the results and any recommendations that are needed prior to doing the field demonstration for your software solution. Next slide, please. And here, last slide, some of the things we need you to consider when you're preparing your software solution for our BAA. At the top there, we mentioned FedRAMP authorized. It's really helpful if you are FedRAMP authorized. It just helps us to widen the scope of the demonstration with your solution. Strong authentication. Is your software solution, does it have strong authentication? Does it require to have two-factor authentication for accessibility for the users? Also, do you have a plan of action for your patching and maintenance plan? So if we recommend that you need to do some security updates during the demonstration, please come with a plan of action to be able to provide those or take care of those updates through the demonstration prior to going to the field demonstration. And how will your system, your software solution, how will it protect the data? Will it be able to protect the data while it's at rest? Will it be able to protect the data while it's in transit and in use? And one of the things before I go is we want to touch on is the top 10 web applications security risks. That's another important one if your software solution does use a web application. You can find these top 10 on the OWASP website. Taking a look at these and working on these helps to minimize the risk, and it's good for you and it's good for us. So it minimizes the risk on your software solution if you've not taken a look at these, but it also minimizes the risk for TSA when we talk about vulnerabilities and exposure to TSA. And with that, I will turn it over to Katja Hilbing. There she is over here. Thank you.
I am the test and evaluation manager for all ITF projects and demonstrations. So basically what that means is I'm the liaison between the PM and the different test entities that would be required or needed to assess any given technology. Go to the next slide. This figure is the ITF timeline, and the box shows where the bulk of the T&E activities, that means preparation as well as execution, would happen. That doesn't mean that we won't be working on T&E activities in any of the other parts of the squiggle there, but this is where the bulk of it will happen. The ITF T&E events are less formal than the typical testing that we do for TSA technologies, which is a good thing. It gives us a lot of flexibility in what we want to test and how we want to test it. It's also a very collaborative process in that the PMs will be working with me and the vendors and the different test entities to help figure out how on earth we should tackle these different systems. As you can imagine, some of them are quite unique, and we don't have templates or specific roadmaps designed for any possibility out there. So we will tailor all the different test activities to whatever technology is presented, and the different maturity levels also. Results of the T&E assessments aid in early discovery of issues and can help expedite technology maturation. Oftentimes when a system's being installed or integrated and before we actually start data collection, we might find out, oops, this isn't quite working the way we wanted to. We could make tweaks if possible. But once we start data collection, the system's pretty much locked in and we need to test the system as it is then. And the ITF T&E results aid the ITF in determining the path forward with the technology, as has been discussed previously. Once we see, hey, how did this thing actually work with the defined user population in the defined application, where should we go next? Next slide. So this is just a little bit more detail within the ITF timeline. I've sort of filled out some additional T&E activities that would happen within that space there. Once the general demonstration approach and use case have been defined, specific data collection plans will be tailored to that project. Within TSA, we have a number of different labs that can be used depending on what type of materials are being tested and what the technology is. Christina talked about some of those, but I'll touch upon some of the major ones like the TSL, the Transportation Security Lab in New Jersey. That's where we would go if we needed to conduct collection testing or if we have to use light exposure or different types of test materials. Whereas if it's more of a functional system or some functional components that we need to test, those would typically come to the TSIF in Arlington, Virginia, where we can run all kinds of different scenarios. We have all kinds of different test articles, and we can basically set up whatever we would need to do for that specific technology. And finally, we also lead the testing in the airport environments. A system, as Christina already mentioned, could either go through lab testing at the TSL and or the TSIF and then go to the field, or in recent history for some of the technologies we've skipped lab testing altogether, gone straight to the field. So again, depending on what the solution is, we would take a look at that and figure out where do we need to go first and what are the steps to get through all the different testing processes. The data collection timelines can vary widely depending on the scope of the demonstration and what information TSA is looking to get out of the demonstration. The long poles in the tent, and this has already been touched upon, are often getting definitions of how the technology will be used and defining metrics against which to measure the technology. This information needs to be defined to begin data collection planning and can take many weeks to complete. Once all the plans and procedures are in place, an actual data collection effort could take itself, the actual data collection to execute could take 2 to 4 weeks, followed by a 45-day reporting period. The 2 to 4 week data collection cycle would be repeated, obviously, if we at each of the different venues where testing might happen. We could be following this process a number of times depending on where the system is tested. And next slide. And to cover some roles and responsibilities for the ITF solution providers, we're expecting the provider to bring formal documentation on system functionality, data flows, interoperability, user guides, configuration and safety documentation, etc. All of that is what we need to start figuring out where to start with the planning for testing. We need the solution provider to support system installation and integration, whether it's in the lab or in the field. We also need them to support TSA in performing configuration audits by providing the supporting documentation for the configuration and safety audits and being on site for those audits if needed. Again, we might not know the system all that well and might not be able to find the different components, so we might need the vendor on site to help with that part of it. We'll also need help with the TSA team training and development group. We would require the solution provider to help train the users and the TSOs on the system operations. This might also include helping to train the test team members, because if they don't know how to use the system, they don't really know how to test it. So there might be a little additional testing for the test team members there. When all of those steps have been completed, we'll require the vendor to sign or acknowledge a test readiness notification. And basically that's saying, yes, the vendor has agreed that the system's installed as it needs to be installed, it's integrated the way it needs to be integrated, everything's functioning the way it needs to be functioned, and we are ready to go forth and test. And once we're in the actual test and data collection mode, we'll require the solution provider to be available to perform maintenance or repairs on the demonstration system when requested for the duration of the demonstration. And again, this could be in the lab, in one of the labs, or in the field as necessary. When we are getting deeper into test planning, a specific test director will be assigned to any project. Our test directors tend to be subject matter experts on specific types of technologies, and will select the test director based on what the solution is. If it's something new that we know nothing about, this test director will probably be assigned based on timing. But again, we will all be working together to figure out how to make this work best. The test director will support the demonstrations and data collection activity in the laboratory and or live airport or field environments. This includes collaborating with the PM and the vendors on metrics that would be applicable and assessing the system in the context of the defined use case. The test director will also coordinate with the test team members, the airport TSA reps, and the ITF PM to ensure that the data collection is conducted according to the plan. The test director will also communicate with all the stakeholders on test progress and issues and support efforts to resolve any test-related issues that may arise. The test director will also control data access and finally conduct analysis and reporting of the results. Sometimes the reporting is just a report, that will be shared with various stakeholders per the ITF PM. Sometimes we're also asked to conduct some briefings on those materials. Again, it's a collaborative process. Since it's not a formal acquisition, we have a lot of flexibility and leeway in how we want to approach these different test activities. So it tends to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to working with you guys. Thank you for your time.
All right, okay, great, this works. All right, so we're running a couple minutes ahead of schedule, which is great, because that'll give you guys some additional time to go get a snack or coffee, whatever you guys need. But we know that was a lot of information, so thank you for bearing with us. Promise the afternoon will be great with the fireside chats. We're really excited for that. We do have a couple minutes for Q&A, so we'll have Matt, our director, come up, and this is your opportunity to pepper him with questions. So please take it. And then raise your hand and I'll run the mic over to you.
Or pepper some of the folks that already spoke with questions.
Hi, I'm Chris Arroyo with Datadog. Question, obviously, great BAA responses adhere to the requirements that are being asked, but I'm curious if there's anything you would recommend around making your BAA stand out, or if there's things that you've seen in other responses that are like, I wish other companies would do that. Thank you.
I think the number one kind of piece of advice in that regard that I would give is operational suitability, operational context. What is it about your solution that means something to the operational component, right? We're here for the user rep side of the business, and we want to be able to characterize and understand the solution in the context of driving requirements for the agency. And so that means if it's something that really truly makes a difference in an operational environment, then that's a quick kind of no-brainer for us, because it's something that we can really apply to the context of our mission space, whether it be cargo screening, airport worker screening, checkpoint property screening, or passenger screening. If we can really understand, the reviewers can understand the technical readiness and the ability to drive impact at that user level or the passenger level, then I think that really speaks volumes in terms of what it is that we're trying to do in that demonstration. Lewis, Peach, PMs, you guys got anything else that might stand out to you? Okay. Yeah.
Matt, I would just add, if you've got questions for our team to kind of help flush out the idea a little bit further, I mean, we're more than willing to have those pre-conversations ahead of time too. I think that back and forth helps with the proposal process. Am I out of bounds there?
No, so to repeat it for folks online, and in case you didn't hear it, Melissa offered, if you've got questions around the operational context or the environment or the solution, shoot us an email, innovationtaskforce@tsa.gov, and we'll staff it internally and look to get you some information about that. I mean, we're here to be accessible and to enable access to that mission space, and so that's part of our business. So feel free to ask those questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, I had a pre-planned question.
You got one?
Just in the event this happened.
Yeah.
So one of the questions we get a lot is, what if I'm a vendor that requires the use of another vendor's solution? So if I'm a third-party algorithm, right, and I need to put my solution on a CT vendor's system to demonstrate, How does ITF handle those situations?
Yeah, you know, a lot of times innovation really comes at that intersection between two different solutions. You know, solution on its own might be fantastic in terms of what it's able to do, but integrated across, it transforms into something, you know, incredibly amazing and really powerful. And so we see it really often where folks have an interdependency. For us, you know, there are some folks that come to us sometimes and say, "Hey, I've got this solution, but it depends on this other vendor's capability. Can you go get them to work with me?" No. I mean, that's gonna stifle that 6-month timeline, right? That Peach talked and emphasized earlier about the technical readiness of the solution. And if the solution's not ready, then we're probably gonna have a conversation about coming back to the door later. Because we want to move, we want to get into the operational environment, we want to be able to get to the user, and we want to be able to drive that demonstration. And we can't do that if the solution's not ready. And so what I would do is I'd encourage you to build those relationships and rapport across the industry base before you come to partner. And I'd also encourage you, if you are already partnered with folks, make sure they know the pieces and parts of this process that we're going to introduce them to. We've had sometimes in the past integrated partnerships that come together. Everybody gets it. They lean in together, and there's no kind of weakest link, if you will, and the chain holds, right? And we really plow new ground and make some things happen. We've had other situations where one of the partners in the process didn't know what to expect, wasn't really prepared for the agreement, didn't want to sign it, didn't want to be a part of it, and that really starts to cause trouble in the process of partnering. What we do is truly a public-private partnership, and it depends upon everybody's commitment to make that work. And when we have kind of some faltering in that, it really kind of starts to make it difficult to be able to deliver a solution to the operational environment. So it's a really important part of the process that maybe gets overlooked, but partnerships are key with government to industry, but within industry as well. So it's important to emphasize that. Yeah.
Ellie Dahman with CGI Federal. Sort of expanding a little bit upon what you just were talking about. What if you see two solutions that separately may not be as strong as you'd like, but together could be a real game changer for TSA? Do you have the capability to pull those two vendors together and have those conversations?
Absolutely. So I didn't mean to say that we're not going to be a matchmaker in the regard that we're not going to try and drive integration where it makes sense. What I meant to clarify there was, if it's a dependency and it's in the critical path, you can't necessarily depend upon us to be able to forcing function in driving that interaction. But we will definitely be able to have conversations, and we have in the past, between different capabilities in which we said, hey, this is a really good solution. We're also demoing this other thing. Maybe you guys should talk and see what we can work out. That's not uncommon, and it's something that we do as part of the process. Being outside of any one given capability management area, we have the opportunity to be able to look across the mission space and see kind of that what that larger kind of look is, and how we can drive a kind of overall passenger experience improvement or a mission execution improvement. Great question. Anybody else?
I'll ask.
Yeah.
Travis Cam, VMD. So you talked a little bit about the airports and the innovation hub. What does that process look like? How do you select them? Does an airport come to you guys with a solution in mind? What does that process look like?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So back when ITF started in 2016, we needed to be able to have lean in locations, FSDs and staffs that were really ready to test things and be flexible and be understanding and patient if something breaks in the operational environment. And we often have with big equipment moves, riggers and infrastructure impacts inside that airport environment. And so what we did is we launched the Airport Innovation Forum as a way to have an application process for an airport authority and the Federal Security Director at local TSA in that airport environment to partner and put an application in together to ITF. We open that up probably every 2 or 3 years for kind of a refresh, but we maintain about 18 or 20 folks that are involved. And what that does is it allows us to know their commitment to the innovation practice and also add emphasis to their willingness to look across the passenger journey, not just within the security checkpoint space or one part of the process. And so we have quarterly engagements with those innovation airports, where each of them gets to go around and present some of the activities that they're working on. And if we have an industry partner that has a solution that's specifically relevant in the airport space that may not be something we're going to demo in our space, we'll introduce them in that form as well. And so we've had vendors submit and present in those environments as well to get them exposure to those airports that really want to lean in, because it takes a village, right? We can't do this work alone. I always like to say the only person doing innovation task force work full time is us. Everybody else is a nice supporter. And so from an airport perspective, having that pre-staged list of folks that are willing to lean in and ready to go. And you'll hear in the Fireside chat when we come back from the break from FSD Burke that runs the Innovation Checkpoint Airport at Las Vegas about all of the kind of work that gets done from a staffing perspective and from a preparatory perspective to make sure that they're able to lean in and make the technology work as well. Great question.
Now, let me add to that real quick.
Yeah.
Just go here.
Yeah, go.
So in that too, there's a lot of existing partnerships. So we have of course, the innovation sites, but if you have a really strong partnership with an airport, again, let us know that. It's not to say we can't do demonstrations outside of those particular spaces, but we really need to know upfront. It just, again, helps us in that planning phase. So, if you already have it deployed somewhere, it's already operationally working at XYZ airport, maybe it's not one of our 20, but we engage really kind of far and wide. So chances are we have relationships there as well. They maybe just didn't apply yet or whatever the reason is, but it doesn't preclude us from doing that. But we just have more of a commitment, I would say, from the ones we've selected. Yeah.
That's a good point. And Pete, you helped me remember, right? In addition to the airports being interested in being a partner, during the demonstration process, our PMs run a selection process. They look at the data that's available from that location and the data that we're trying to glean from the demonstration, and they work to pair it up and make a match that way so that we get the most suitable operational environment that we can for the demonstration that we're going to do. There are some airports that have international only terminals, and if the demonstration is suitable for that environment, then we're going to look at that and make that match as we go through that process. So that's a little bit more of the thread on how does an airport get a demo in terms of doing that matchmaking. And as Peach said, we've had folks come in and say, hey, I prefer this because it's closer to my office and it's easier for us to support it. We take that into consideration in the matching process as well. So it's a good partnership in that regard.
Hi, Ian Moore, Factor 10. It's working now. Firstly,
Was.
it was signing off. Well,
Go ahead, I'll repeat it.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much for your time today. It's awesome. So much engagement. A lot of what you all highlighted in the demo really is transformation. As you seek that transformation, obviously it's quite impactful to much of the travelers. So, prior to these demonstrations, are you able to actually get ahead and provide some level of training or familiarization with the different technology or perhaps approach in advance of the demonstration?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Ian, thanks for the question. To repeat it for folks, it was a question around what's the training kind of components look like in advance of a demonstration going to the field. And so, often that human factor piece is the linchpin in the success of a demonstration, right? Technology isn't the problem, the people are. And so in many cases, that training is absolutely critical, and we provide that as part of the process. So from a starting point, the innovation airports are there because they're ready to lean in and they know the commitment that they're about to make in terms of extra hours the officers need to take in order to be able to learn a new solution or new capability. And we work really closely with the vendor and our training and development folks to augment kind of how that training gets executed, and make sure that it's a part of that process in terms of looking for a really robust way to interact and make sure that the officers understand the capability, why we're demoing it, what we're looking to learn. That demonstration plan as part of the process gives us the metrics about kind of what we're looking for from a performance characterization perspective, and that plays into kind of how the procedures are written and then how that training is integrated for the officers. So great question. One of the pieces that we really provide is that access point. Vendor direct interaction with the officers is incredibly important. And we found that in many cases, the officers are giving feedback that we wouldn't have thought up from a headquarters perspective. A lot of our PMs are former officers at this point, so they're giving you some of that feedback in advance of getting to the field. But the officers themselves can give you invaluable feedback that we wouldn't be able to replicate or provide otherwise. Great question. Yeah.
David Olive, Xavier's slide on cybersecurity talked about software and all the problems that you want to avoid on software. I didn't see any discussion on hardware, supply chain, particularly ensuring no counterfeit parts, things that are not on prohibited list. What are you looking at? What are you telling people? What are the standards?
Yeah, no, that's great. So the question was, how do we look at hardware from a security perspective in addition to the software that we're looking at as well? And I'd say we do supply chain vetting. We look at kind of how that product is put together as part of the configuration management process in terms of auditing what's in the gear that we're evaluating. And that's all a critical part of the process. And I'll tell you, Xavier did a fantastic job of giving you an overview of the cyber and the software piece. Most of what we do today doesn't have, is not hardware only, right? There's a software component to everything. And so it's important to familiarize yourself with those things. But one of the nice things about our process is we can work within the risk trade space to potentially find an operational environment or a lab environment that allows us to have some more risk appetite, if you will. The things that are mandates are things that we have to have in place for the long-term implementation at a large scale. During a demo, it's a shorter term, one-stop kind of piece with a targeted approach, and so we can take a little bit more risk in that space, especially if we can do it in a contained manner in terms of how we evaluate the capability. So it's good and important to be familiar with those. It's important to design those things in from the front end, but it's something that we'll also evaluate as part of the characterization. Okay. If there's no other questions, then I think we'll hop to the break. We've been going at it for a little while. We had said we'll be back at 12:55 per the agenda. We'll give you a longer break. And so folks online, please set your timers and get back with us about 12:55, and we'll get started with a fireside chat with FSD Burke from the Innovation Checkpoint and Las Vegas Airport. We'll then move to a fireside chat with Chief Innovation Officer Steve Parker and myself, and then we'll close out with another Q&A. So look forward to seeing you back after the break. Thanks for the questions, and we'll see you again.
Go, I go. Break, and I haven't had a chance to eat American Grill. So, yeah, so this one.
I think so. I think
I'm already looking at how it's
oh, knocked out.
next week is actually Fireside. That would be very exciting.
It is fun. Waiting until Yeah.
Testing, testing. Mine's on.
Mic check 1 2. All right, everybody. If we could start finding our seats.
Okay, good. They could see.
Real quick, one thing I forgot to mention, just logistics thing. There are microphones that are in the ceiling throughout this conference room. And it's also for us as well in the back to make sure that any side conversations, unfortunately for those who are dialed in and watching on YouTube, sometimes that stuff gets picked up. So just wanted to give you guys that heads up. So don't talk bad about Peach. Is what we're saying. All right. Well, thanks so much. Hopefully you guys had a good TSA cafeteria experience. Leave us 5 stars on Yelp. And with that, we'll start with our first fireside chat, and we'll hand it over to FSD Burke and Christina Peach. So over to you guys.
Thank you, Steve. We got, okay, I can hear myself. Thank you again for those of you maybe who missed it earlier. I'm Christina Peach, the branch manager from the Demonstration Management and Execution branch within the Innovation Task Force. With me today, we're fortunate enough to have FSD Burke, and ma'am, I'll turn it over to you for introductions.
All right, hopefully you can hear me. My name's Karen Burke, and I'm the Federal Security Director for the state of Nevada. So whatever's in Nevada is mine. With regard to TSA activities, I've been with TSA for over 20 years now. So it's really from the beginning when we first stood up. And prior to that, I was in the aviation industry. I worked for United Airlines for 30 years. So I have a lot of aviation and transportation kind of experience, which makes some of the work we do with the Innovation Checkpoint really fun. So I look forward to talking a little more later about that, but thanks for letting me be here today.
Thank you, and I'm gonna hand this to you if you want to use it. They're having a bit of a hard time using it or hearing you, so up to you.
Okay.
So we may have to switch back and forth there.
Okay, well, I'm okay.
Oh, now I can hear you perfectly. All right, so again, thank you for being here with us today. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the DMX branch. We're going to talk about what the future of the aviation security or the checkpoints could look like, some key partnerships, and really best practices for becoming a TSA or ITF partner. So earlier, I really kind of dove into the actual demonstration lifecycle. That demonstration lifecycle, it's robust and intense to say the least, but that is a part of what the DMX team does. So the DMX team is also responsible for the larger portfolio of demonstration activity going on. Again, that could come from things like partnerships with S&T, even internal things within TSA, within RCA specifically. So demonstrations can kind of come at us from any angle. But there are also strategic initiatives and the ACE mission, or advancing the checkpoint environment. And that ACE mission is really important to us. It's something that was established a couple of years ago, but the innovation checkpoint being really a big piece of that ACE mission. So when we think about advancing the checkpoint, we think about the innovation checkpoint, and then we think about also the innovation test bed. So under that mission, there are two different things. The innovation checkpoint being the public version, that's where we're able to really take technology in do assessments in a live operational environment, engage with the officers. And the innovation test bed is at the TISA facility over next to DCA. And that's where we can look at things and we have a little more flexibility, as you've heard about today, some of the lower TRL solutions, some of the different things that maybe need a lab assessment, we could go there, we can leverage what's in that innovation test bed space, and that's open to everyone. So, you know, they do fall under the ACE mission, which is largely ITF, but just anybody in RTA or TSA can use those. So while it's really helpful for us to have them for the demonstration activity, regardless of what we're taking in solution-wise, we also see a lot of other capability managers taking things out to that space, again, because of just the incredible partnership that we have out there. The ACE, I'll say the ACE mission or those two lab or kind of, we won't call the innovation checkpoint a lab quite yet, but those two spaces, it's kind of pioneering change, and that's what ITF does. So it doesn't exist anywhere else. It's a one-of-one type facility. Again, we're able to take things out there, and the officers have been so incredible since standing this up. I'm sure you'll talk about that as we move forward, but it was a dynamic shift, right? We didn't have these kind of locations before. So it was take a solution in, let's think about where to go, let's find the right partnerships. But what's unique about the innovation checkpoint is that we have so many different pieces of technology. So in a typical checkpoint, you have a lot of the same technology, right? All this vendor CT or this vendor AIT, things of that nature. We kind of throw everything at FSD Brooke and her team, and they're always there to catch it and run with it and help us get what we need from a demonstration perspective. The live airport environment, that's the key piece to the innovation checkpoint. Is it's one thing to look at things in the lab, one thing to do our assessments there, but every time we would get a solution and go out to the airport, we learn all these things, and there's just no way to replicate how passengers going to react to some of those things. So having the innovation checkpoint available for that space is really critical to kind of the transition pathway and what do we do with the solution after it's been demonstrated. So it's been around for over 4 years now. So FSD Brooke, in your experience so far in those 4 years, you know, what do you think are some of the larger successes that you've seen at the innovation checkpoint?
Well, now do I have it on?
There you go.
All right, how's that? Oh, you can hear me now. So I think we've had a lot of success. I might just give you a little background. You know, I love innovation. I always have. And so when I got to Las Vegas, I also learned that my airport director wanted to be cutting edge with all sorts of technology. And so one of the things I always volunteered, raised my hand and said, we'll try that, we'll try that. I do that because I think it really helps to keep my employees on their toes. They give input, they feel more valuable, they really can make a difference. So the frontline employees, I think, really get a tremendous amount out of it. And what we found is that although they would test in a lab environment, it was never enough. Not TSOs hadn't spent enough time with the equipment. So afterwards, after we bought this stuff and we roll it out, all of a sudden we're getting this feedback. Oh, this isn't quite right, or that isn't quite right. So why not do it beforehand and have passengers and our frontline employees really be able to touch, feel, play with, see what comes. So as Christina said, being in a live environment is really critical to getting all of the feedback that you need in order to say a piece of equipment is really going to work. Our airport director was kind enough, we actually have a 17-lane checkpoint available, and they weren't going to be using it for processing passengers. So that's the space that we have, that the airport has gifted us, so to speak, to be able to use. And that's why we have so much space to have a lot of different equipment. But we've had a tremendous success with, you know, we've had 4 or 5 different CTs. We had them without ASLs initially. Then we got ASLs, and oh my gosh, the difference that our employees saw, you know, much better throughput. We had the ability to not have to divest quite as much because the whole combination really just worked a lot better. The impact that had with the better images, better detection, better throughput was so significant that, again, our employees went, wow. And you really understand what impact it's going to have when you roll it out then from a national standpoint. AIT, same thing. We've had several different versions, different software. Every time we're getting an improvement. And, it makes a difference with how we can operate operationally. And it's not just one piece of equipment, because you need to sequence your pieces of equipment in the screening lane so that they all mesh together to maximize your performance and maximize what you want for customer service with your passengers. CAT machines, we've had every version of a CAT machine you could probably want. So we've lived through some of the good times and some of the times where we said, yep, we got more work to do. But we see that the identification piece is a very important part of the process. And so the commitment level is really there. And the officers, we kind of handpick who goes down there to make sure that, one, they have a great interest and that they have some aptitude for, making sure that they're able to work all the technology. And what I find is they are so invested in trying to maximize the performance of each piece of equipment that it's incredible. And a vendor is usually around for a while. So we work together. The TSO will give feedback, and then the vendor says, oh, this is what you do, or this is why that happens. And you find the feedback exchange is really beneficial and really helps the process and helps the whole testing piece. We've had other things with the passenger analytics and wait times, things that some of the airports and other people are into as well. So we partner where we can, certainly within the innovation checkpoint, but our airport happens to have wait time systems as well. And one bought the other. So now we try to partner in a different kind of way because of that. But there hasn't really been anything that we've had come to the innovation checkpoint that hasn't had a great deal of success. There's a lot of visibility too. I would tell you that people are just fascinated by the innovation checkpoint. We've probably had 40 countries that have come to the innovation checkpoint. And I guarantee you that the number is in the thousands now of people that had visited. We give tours. We try to make sure that we expose all of the visitors so your equipment, if it's there, gets really good exposure to a high level of people that are very interested in technology. A lot of them are going to be building a new facility, so they want to see what capabilities are there, what might fit best. Some take up more space, some don't, but all those things are what they begin to look at and ask questions about. So it's just been so much more successful than I even thought it could be. So we look forward to hopefully having some of your equipment through this process come. And right now you supply quite a bit of it. So I'm very pleased to be here and certainly support this process.
Thank you, ma'am. And as you mentioned, a lot of things happened there, but that it takes key partnerships. And I think that's really the underlying piece. Clark County Aviation Authority, as well as local TSA, the partnerships have to be there with the vendors. And as we bring technology in, there's a space for it. That's one thing, right? So great, we have a space to put it. But then how do you operationalize it? And we're talking about so many different pieces of technology, so many different things. So having the airports and the airlines engaged in that process, letting them know what's going on, and being a critical partner throughout the demonstration I can't underscore that enough. I think that we've had really great partnerships throughout Las Vegas, but in many airports. And as I think about, vendors coming in, and we kind of mentioned earlier, talk to the airlines, talk to the airports. They're interested in technology. There's a lot of innovative focus. And it's not just coming from the ITF or the TSA side of things. So if you have those relationships, foster them, and it really leads to pretty incredible things as we move forward. With the Clark County Airport Authority, another thing, you can see a picture up there too of, I'll kind of hit on real quickly, the lanyards. You know, this is something talking about the pride that the officers have. So they said, hey, we kind of designed a lanyard. We would love to wear these at the innovation checkpoint. And it's like, that means I work there. This is our space. And they're really dedicated to the mission that we have in that space. So they did, they designed the checkpoint lanyards. They wear them every day. We were fortunate enough, Greg has one on here today, as a matter of fact. So, you know, we were able to get a couple for ourselves, but just really great to see them having that amount of pride in the things that happen there. But with today's footprint in the innovation checkpoint, we have 4 lanes worth of equipment. One of the things, and really again, back to that partnership with Clark County, we're expanding that. So we're moving that now to 8 lanes. Soon we will have the capability to put even more equipment into that space, into the footprint that exists. And also doing things, infrastructure, you know, above the ceiling, below the ceiling, moving power and data, make sure we're able to accommodate what's coming in the future, what we think is coming in the future. And so the connectivity, we've hit on this a couple of times throughout the day today, but really we are seeing so many more software-based solutions, right? We have CTs now, we have ASLs, and so what's next? It's software. How do we start integrating things? How do we start connecting things? So the infrastructure work being done takes all of that into account. We're talking about power, data, you know, whips in the ceiling, remote screening room built in the back to really support us as we continue to move forward. And so we're not just thinking about the now, we're thinking about the next 5 years from now. And where do we have to go? And now we're going to have the infrastructure to do that, which is really exciting. But FSC Burke, you know, what advice would you give to those that are looking to either partner with ITF, TSA, or maybe even airlines or airports?
You know, we keep talking partnership and relationships, but you know, there's a community of people that really are invested in innovation, and becoming part of that community and building relationships just with people that love innovation is really important. You'd be surprised what you pick up. You know, we have these conferences in Las Vegas, you know, Future Travel Experience, FTE is one of them. Even CES, which is traditionally every year in January in Las Vegas. The amount of people that you can run into with ideas that generate other ideas, and people that you meet who have connections, who can help with other things. We mostly are doing a variety of checkpoint kinds of innovation, but a lot of aviation and airport people and airlines go to those as well. In fact, key speakers are, you know, Delta Airlines CEO and other folks. So I think Austin mentioned this morning, you know, going to some of those conferences really gives you an ability to spread out, get to meet people, and look for, if it's not a full partnership and actually demonstrating something, at least a relationship that you know, word of mouth spreads. People hear about what product you may have and that it might be of interest. I think that also helps with the submissions. If your, you know, word of mouth is, wow, this is really a good thing, then TSA is probably going to pick it up and give it a shot. So I think it's all about outreach, communication, being part of the community, and working as closely as possible to build those linkages that will help you. I see that as the most important.
Thank you, ma'am. And you know, it's a shameless plug, right? The BAA is open. We've talked about this. Today's Industry Day for the broad agency announcement. So the innovation checkpoint is one of those focus areas that is on there. So again, we're expanding that space. So something to think about, take into consideration. But you know, as we think about what are we moving towards, and what does the future of aviation look like? I'll let you weigh in on that, and then I'll touch quickly on some of the things back to the broad agency announcement. But you know, what are you looking for as we're here trying to get individuals to think about submitting to the BAA? What would you like to see?
Well, I think there are 3 categories that have been touched on today that are really important, and that's either something that can make us more efficient, something that can make security more effective, and the passenger experience. Now, all of you are not walking around an airport floor, but I do. So I talk to lots of passengers as well as my employees. But passengers, there was this movie called Total Recall. Remember that? And you could walk down this tunnel of truth, and all of a sudden you were screened and you were okay, right? So that's what passengers, even today, still refer to. They want it to be as touchless an environment as possible, as simplistic, and have technology really do all of the screening, but in a way that's less invasive than what we do today. So I think if you pick those three areas and you can make some impact, because we're not there yet, right? We have a ways to go. So we'll probably have a lot of BAA submissions on the way to getting there. But if you can help make a difference in one of those key areas, that's a major contribution to take us another step forward towards that total recall kind of vision. And I don't know whether we'll ever totally get there, but I'm a believer. So I think anything you can do in those areas is just going to be absolutely terrific. And you can count on, if your equipment's in the innovation checkpoint, again, my TSOs are creative as well. And so they'll come up with thoughts and ideas. And it's truly a collaborative environment where we're sharing ideas all the time with the vendors, between our folks. And I look forward to the day when we can have the total recall, but until then, I'll look forward to having you come visit the innovation checkpoint.
And to get to total recall, it is those often incremental pieces, right? So if we look at the screening today, it's how do we get one step closer, 2 steps closer? Starting to take those steps, I think, is really the key piece. And so, hoping to see a lot of those submissions through the open window now. It's open until October 17th. Hopefully today you've had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the demonstration specific pieces, as well as some helpful hints and tips and tricks to submit into that route agency announcement. And we look forward to getting those submissions and going through them. I know we're just about out of time, so we won't open it up for questions and answers quite yet. We can save that. But FSD Burke, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your continued support of innovation. Having a partner like you just makes it that much better. So really appreciate all the efforts. And thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, if you guys could just get going. The other one. Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah. He's probably wondering the same thing about me.
All right. So for our last fireside chat of the day, we're fortunate again to have our Chief Innovation Officer, Mr. Parker, as well as our Director, Matt. And thank you very much to Christina and FSD Burke. That was great. Thank you so much. All right, over to you guys.
Hope you guys can hear this. There you go. All right. We got audio now?
I think so.
All right. So you guys know me, Matt Gilkeson, Director of Innovation Task Force, and we're really excited to have with us today our Chief Innovation Officer, Stephen Parker. Stephen joined us earlier this year and is carrying forward the torch associated with the innovation doctrine and all of the great work up in strategy, policy, and innovation. Stephen, I'll kick it over to you for opening salvo if you'd like.
All right. Happy to be here today. Y'all still hear me okay? Yep, just fine. So the Chief Innovation Office was established, y'all, in 2018. So it's a relatively new position, but the administrator wanted a role in the front office that would focus their primary attention on enterprise innovation. So this role was created to do that, and not long after that, well, I should say I'm the third Chief Innovation Officer that has been in this role. So we came a couple of years after the ITF, and when I came on board, I didn't quite understand the structure of having an innovation task force and then also having a Chief Innovation Office. We're not tied in organizationally, but I came to understand that my office, again, focuses on enterprise innovation and not just technology, but also how the agency moves forward with policy and process as well. So it sort of goes across the landscape. And in October 2022, the Innovation Doctrine was published, and it's a collection of best practices in the innovation industry. And it suggests that we should be willing to take small bets, that everyone should put their problem-solving hat on. It's a call to action to the workforce in the field as well as in headquarters to get in the game and be a part of the solution of keeping us ahead of these emerging threats. And, you know, it's sometimes nice to start out with, well, why the hell should we care? Can I do that? Yeah. Why should we care about innovation? And innovation is important, y'all, because our adversaries are innovating all the time. They're not restricted by budget cycles, or then they're not restricted by the lack of ingenuity and how to attack us and to hurt us. And so our innovation shops have to work together to keep our agency an agile agency and on the cutting edge. Was that too much?
No, that's perfect. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with regard to the level of kind of top cover front office advocacy culture of innovation work that's incredibly important, right? ITF set up in 2016. We were kind of lone rangers, if you will, in the organization, running kind of this innovation spirit and culture. And having the Chief Innovation Officer stand up at the top, I think is a extremely important principle and part of helping us navigate some of the waters. I mean, as you said, the adversary is not constrained. We are the government, and when you talk innovation, typically you try to be as unconstrained as possible, but we have things called laws. We can't break laws. So our chief counsel is one of our best friends. He gives me a hard time, Chris Reams, a hard time all the time, because I like to get right up against the law. I'm very comfortable. My wife's a lawyer, so I like to know what the language is, words have meaning, and not cross the line, but policies, procedures, everything else is on the table for us to be able to kind of move and bend around and get through. And so, you know, your office being there and having that doctrine and having that kind of press as an agency call to action, I think has been incredibly beneficial to get everybody to understand that culture that we're trying to embrace and embody.
Yeah, you got a couple of snickers around your lawyer being, your wife being an attorney. I'm an attorney as well. I got laughter online. One of the things that I love about this role, y'all, is being in an innovation space, we get to conduct a good deal of discovery. We get to iterate. We get to try a thing, and if it's not quite working, then we pivot and we try something else. As an attorney, although we could come up with innovative arguments for our client, you know, you can't quite show up to the judge with a half-baked brief or a half-baked argument in that environment, and nor could you. I also work in public service. I was Senator John Ossoff's Deputy State Director in the state of Georgia. And you don't have the luxury of being able to take these sort of small bets and try to see if a thing works or not. So being in this space, it is challenging because, you know, when I'm with the administrator and he introduces me, he says, Steve's job is not to do innovation, it's to create an environment where innovation will thrive. So on the one hand, you know, pressure's off. I don't have to do innovation. ITF has to do innovation. I don't have to do innovation. But on the other hand, there's this abstract, amorphous, create this environment where it will thrive, Steve, and report back to me in 3 months how you're doing, you know? And so what does it have to look like? And that's where we take this doctrine that we came up with in October, and we are now in the phase of how do we operationalize it? How do we create this environment where innovation can thrive? And there's a couple of ways that approaches we're taking. but don't want to get ahead of your match.
No, yeah, I know, I think.
Very good, then I'll go right into
That's where we were going.
operationalizing the innovation doctrine. Then, so the primary ways that we're looking at creating this environment, one is affecting the culture here at TSA, and the other is removing impediments to innovation. So I'm engaged along with our attorneys, our chief counsel office, in doing an assessment at the administrator's request of all of his core authorities. And so we're going to assess them, and he wants to know, where am I exercising them, and where is there room for me to exercise further of my authorities that can move impediments to innovation out of the way. So there are two ways we're going to do it. We're going to affect the culture, and then we're going to look for ways to go in with precision and say, hey, the administrator has authority to change how we're doing this thing, and it would make life better here. It'll result in a better result for the agency. As far as the culture change is concerned, the administrator had an idea early on that one of the ways that we would be more innovative is if we approach our frontline workforce and ask them, what challenges are you facing, and then provide a platform for them to be able to communicate solutions, because they're on the front lines, y'all. They're encountering the threats, they're encountering challenges to doing their jobs effectively. They're encountering challenges with their scheduling, right? So one of the ways we'll affect culture is to invite our workforce to put their problem-solving hat on and tell us what the issues are and provide us with solutions. And we have a platform that we use called Idea Factory that we have retooled and revamped to the innovation pipeline, so they're actually able to go into a system and go through the various vetting steps of that system and come up with solutions on the other end. So engaging the workforce, engaging our government, academic, and our industry partners, and then finally my team, my very small but mighty team of 4. We look for opportunities within the agency to show up and provide create a sprint team around an issue. So we think we live in this world of innovation paradigms, right? So we think we can show up to your issue and bring an innovation paradigm to maybe trying to get to a solution. And one of those that's come to us is looking into firearms at the checkpoint. And so we've got program folks, because my office is not a program office. Remember, it's an enterprise office that's looking for opportunities within the agency to help folks out. And we'll get with folks, we'll convene folks, and then we'll take jump into an issue within a time-bound manner and try to come up with a solution of how we can solve some of these issues. Is this yours or mine?
That's yours.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So you talked about that innovation kind of pipeline piece of the business that you guys have put in place. What are some of the other key components of the doctrine that are helping us out as an enterprise?
So as we operationalize it, we've created these what they're called are list cells. So they're teams at each one of the airports. So when I say we're engaging the workforce, how we're doing it is recruiting teams at each one of the airports to assemble and problem solve. So when I got here December, January, there were 23 airports that had these teams. As of last week, we're at 45 now, which represents 270 airports, or 63% of the federalized airports across the nation. So we have teams of employees who are gathering together for the specific purpose of offering up solutions on how their jobs can be better, how we can detect threats better, all of that. And one other thing that has not happened that we've got going, and we're always iterating, y'all, but for the first time, there's this distributed network of these teams communicating on Microsoft Teams. So if they're having a problem at DFW, that Las Vegas or LAX, some of those teams are all talking. And some of them have access to 3D printers, so they're solving some of their own issues on the spot, and they'll share files so that other airports are also able to take advantage of whatever the solutions are that they're coming up with. So list cells is one of the 4. I just talked to you a little bit about Launchpad is the one where we're sort of creating an accelerated action team around the problem and helping folks solve that. The third is the innovation pipeline. That is the platform by which our lift cells are working on their problems. And we are looking at having lift cells at headquarters as well, so that, those are field problems primarily that are being solved out in the field, but maybe there are operations here in headquarters that could also benefit from having a team assembled around coming up with problem statements and then allowing us to help them work through them. And then finally, so we have lift cells, we have the launchpad, accelerated action team, the innovation pipeline, and then finally there's this ventures line that we don't quite know what it's going to be just yet. But the idea is that we would focus in on finding out how to get emerging tech into the agency faster. We want to be a better buyer. We want to explore what are some of the needs that we have and how some in the commercial sector can match with them. We've done a little preliminary discovery with folks who have worked in the government field. So Air Force has AFWorks, and in fact, we stole the lift cell idea from them because they have spark cells at various Air Force bases that do exactly what our lift cells do. So we stole that from them. And so we talked to people who started those, we talked to people who have started DIU, and we're talking to folks who were sort of the founding fathers and mothers of some of these government innovation shops. And many of them have now gone over to the venture capitalist side. And so we want to talk to them and ask what do we have to do to be inviting for you to want to invest in companies who can provide emerging tech for us. And so once we kind of start working through some of that discovery, we'll work with our partners at RCA and ITF to really figure out if there's any kind of matches. But the other beautiful thing about this job is we get to do a ton of discovery and go find out what's out there and what's available to us.
It's great to get a walkthrough of the doctrine, right? I've always said the difference between science and messing around is writing it down.
Yeah.
And having kind of that roadmap and that plan really gives us a kind of core backbone to be able to rely on. The other piece, as you're talking about ventures, right? It's a really great partnership opportunity for us to be able to look at how hopefully in the future, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about a little bit open architecture and open platform system library. That's right. We're looking at creating with a security first mentality, something like an Apple walled garden, if you will, with that SDK that vendors will hopefully be able to implement into our programs of record. And I think in that future state, that busts the door wide open for venture capital and independent vendors to be able to come in and access our capability. What do you see in regard to kind of some of the other opportunities in that space?
In the space of us being able to work together and
like with the customer experience roadmap and or the innovation kind of activity, being able to bring the Silicon Valley partners to the table. Anything there?
It's early on, and this is my 8th month, on the job. Sometimes it feels like 5 years. Other times it feels like 3 weeks. There's so much to absorb and to take in. So I'm actually sort of getting my feet under me, understanding how our ITF BAA process works, how our contracting and procurement and our APM contracting and our APM folks, how all of that works. And so we're in the early stages of sort of exploring this. And I think that there's going to be opportunities for us to determine that together in that respect. You mentioned the customer experience roadmap. I'm the executive sponsor in charge of making sure that we are assessing all of the ways in which we're engaging with our customers, and not just passengers, but airports and airlines and other regulated parties that we encounter, and trying to figure out where we want to go. And I think that one of the goals we have in our roadmap is one that's related to technology. And in fact, we're starting the writing process of this roadmap now. And I think we've got a working session with RCA folks in a couple of days to talk through all the technology that impacts the customers and where we think we want to go with it.
Well, one of the things RCA has been working really closely with is digital identity and biometrics and what that means for improvement to customer experience. We're working really hard on the privacy aspects of that digital identity and the kind of one-time use biometric. Is there anything you see in the future in terms of where we go with that biometric playing a larger role in the travel experience?
I was with the administrator at South by Southwest earlier, y'all, and at the end of it, he did a press gavel. But during his presentation, he says at some point, biometrics won't be an option for the traveling public. And so when he was done, all the reporters rushed up. All the reporters rushed up to him and said, sir, did you say that it would not be an option? And what about privacy concerns and all that? And he's like, no, absolutely said that. That's where we're headed. We're headed at a point to where, folks will be able to walk into the airport and you'll be identified by the network of cameras and verify that it's you. And we'll add to the contactless and seamless experience of going through an airport. You all know that we see that already with sort of the contactless backdrop. And, I imagine a world, I want to go into the future a little bit as well, Karen. I imagine a world where we walk in to the airport, you're identified, you drop your bag, and then you walk through a checkpoint, and perhaps, and there are concept drawings of this, perhaps there's these big 3 tunnels, right? And I went to one airport where the data was sort of saying, hey, scan your ticket here, and we'll flash your name up on the kiosk and tell you where your gate is and what direction to go. So can you imagine sort of having these 3 tunnels, and one is known traveler, one is regular traveler, and one is the one I get sort of randomized too often on, which is, that the one tunnel where, folks who might need to go through that will go through that, and you walk up, your name appears above it, and it tells you what gate and things to go to, but you go to the green tunnel or the yellow tunnel or the red tunnel, and perhaps you're able to just sort of bring your bag along with you. And you're getting scanned, the bag is getting scanned, and then you get to your gate. And I'm told that this is already the case in UAE, that, they have sort of a Cat 2 system there where, you just show your face and you go on your flight. You don't talk to anybody. Oh, I just touched you, unless you needed to be pulled to the side. So I imagine some future state of how we conduct ourselves will look like that.
Yeah, and I think some people hear that and get scared from a perspective. I think one of Boston's quotes that I always like to use is, he said, with all the self-service, eventually we might lose the ability to communicate with each other. And so I think it's important to emphasize in that process the importance of the people in the process. Our transportation security officers are state of the art in terms of global security. What do you see in that kind of future state in terms of their role, right? We don't see them going away. We just see them doing something different, right?
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't matter how good the algorithm gets. Algorithms are not human and do not have the instincts that we'll be able to bring to it. And technology breaks down. And so I don't imagine there's ever going to be a scenario where you're not encountering someone from our agency.
Yeah. I mean, the importance there is, having the technology being able to interact and enable and be ergonomic and accessible to the officers to be able to enable them to do their job. We got about a couple more minutes here. With that, what do you see as kind of the future of the innovation efforts across TSA? What do you see as our kind of big hurdles or opportunities?
I think with any large effort to sort of do a culture shift, I think innovation has always actually been a part of TSA. I was reminded of that, I think my 3rd or 4th week in here when I met with Melanie Harvey and Michael Rotman over security ops. They took no time to remind me that innovation has always occurred here at TSA. And I heard, so don't think you're coming in here doing anything we haven't done. That's what I heard. That's not what they said. But they said you're going to get your best innovation coming out of the field. So I think if we continue to provide an avenue for our field folks and our headquarters folks to generate solutions to our problems, then we're going to be better off. If through the effort that myself and the Chief Counsel Office is undertaking to identify rulemaking authority of the administrator that can remove impediments to innovation, I think we're gonna be better off.
Yeah, I think the nail you just hit on the head there is sitting here on the front row. Not to put the cameras up that run our demonstrations on point, but how many of you guys are former officers? Just raise your hand. Michelle's not listening, but she'd raise her hand too. Majority of the program managers that are running the demonstrations are officers straight out of the field, because it's that operational context that is critical to the success of the demo. Well, with that, I know you're busy and you got a lot of things on the agenda. I don't want to hold you up for the rest of the day. Anything else you want to wrap up with?
No, I'm happy to be here. This was an educational process for me as well. I mean, as many times as I can learn about our various processes, it helps me out. And what a well-run industry day today. Congratulations to you all.
Thank you very much. And we can't do it without the partnership that we have, and I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
Like moments.
All right, well, thank you guys. Okay, well, we've come to the end of our event, and we do have just one more opportunity for you guys to ask questions. So feel free to have a question, raise your hand. We'll run over a mic to you. All right, this is great.
Question for you all. We just wrapped up. I think many of us in here would agree that you all are setting a standard culturally for what others may aspire to in terms of creating that culture of innovation, enabling the field to do that. With you all leading the way, how do you foresee, a couple of years ago as digital services, now we see the customer experience directorate over in other parts of DHS. What does that partnership look like for you all, and how could they aid you?
Yeah. Coda wants me to get on camera, so I'll walk back over here. I'll tell you, from a partnership perspective, across DHS, there's something we have called the Innovation Collective, that brings together all the innovation-minded folks across the agencies and the components, and has a regular ongoing dialogue. Mr. Parker mentioned the Teams channels. We've got a Teams that runs across the Innovation Collective. And so everybody's sharing all their events, and I'm sure we've got some of those Innovation Collective folks joining on the YouTube now. So we're always sharing and cross-pollinating some of the best practices, some of the ideas that they come up with how to go about accessing some of the contractual mechanisms or procedural pieces, or even some of the technology pieces, right? We're not the only ones that use some of the kind of technologies that we have, and so sharing those best practices is critical. The stand-up of more innovation activity is extremely important and helpful. We're not the only ones that we don't have a trademark on innovation, right? So having more of those folks around is really helpful. You mentioned digital services in the IT world at TSA. I know Yemi was stopping through earlier, our Chief Information Officer, and he's really leaning in hard on how we can partner for a launch of the Innovation Cloud. We talked about the Innovation Checkpoint, Innovation Testbed. We're launching Innovation Cloud, which is going to be an online, cloud space that we'll be able to leverage for our software demonstrations, hopefully providing us that logical space that's similar to the physical space that we have in Vegas, that gives us the ability to test the capabilities of those components. Having that lean in is really important, and leveraging the Chino's advocacy to be able to have those shops operate in the different parts of just TSA has been phenomenal. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can just yell.
Yeah.
So I mean, typically in government, and Chris Dorflinger, typically in government, there's an issue with recruiting and attainment of talented staff. And with your team being the Innovation Task Force, you're really breeding that culture of innovation and bringing people from maybe that's in the corporate side of the house back over to federal that have great ideas because you're breeding that. I was kind of curious on what you're doing with the recruitment side of, from HR perspective within TSA, kind of helping bring more and more talent and showcasing what you guys are doing as such a great group, what you're doing with talent acquisition as well. So just kind of curious there as far as what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I can speak to a little bit. I don't know if you have anything else to add a little bit. I'll tell you, one of the examples was in public last week at DEF CON. TSA had a booth at DEF CON with the administrator, and our secretary was out there. And they were doing recruitment activities. That was a large thrust of the booth out there, was to be able to recruit the best talent in that space, to be able to help us move that cybersecurity needle forward and the IT infrastructure forward. They had a really good team out there doing that. With regard to kind of the other parts of recruitment and hiring, I'll hit on 2 things real quick. One, the administrator did a Herculean task over the last couple of years that I don't think anybody's ever seen in recent history of government, and that was pay fairness. Getting the ability for us to be on the same pay scale at the officer level across the board is a dramatic change and shift, and it helps us professionalize that workforce in a level that we weren't able to do previously just because we didn't have the authority. It really wasn't there. Congress worked really hard to get us the funding to be able to do that, and that's already dropped the attrition rates. So it's changed the way we think about kind of some of the recruitment pieces as well. But I don't know, Mr. Parker, anything?
I'll just add, as part of the efforts for on our enterprise innovation, one of the things I've done in my first 4 or 5 months here is try to identify early partners and allies throughout the agency who are also forward thinking. One of those people is Jason Nelson, who's in charge of our human capital. And he has, in our initial meeting, he's already thought of ways to try to improve how quickly we can hire and getting a nice quality pool of folks to bring on as well. So there are folks who are here and stationed already who are already thinking how we can get the best talent in. And he's one of the biggest champions.
FSC Burke, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add from a recruitment perspective.
No, I probably would just say not to underestimate our workforce, because I would hate to tell you how many people have actually started on the front line. They're very talented and they move on to positions and make contributions that are extraordinary. So I think it's sometimes making sure you don't miss what you have in-house because they can be developed and really do well.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Any other questions?
Like at one of these cool mics. Time breath. Question is, if a vendor has a solution that maybe has a software component, maybe software focused, and a hardware, would you recommend in the BAA that they have 2 different submissions if it's for a similar topic, or would you want one solution for the company as a whole?
That's a great question. I would look at it from the solution perspective, right? Let's draw the lineage back to the problem that we're trying to solve. If the problem can't be solved independently by one of the things, then I would put in the whole, because I think you run the risk of putting in separate ones and getting them evaluated separately, and then having kind of that trade space of misunderstanding that will happen between the two. And folks will say, well, I don't understand how this one interacts with that one. And if I don't choose this one, do I get to do something different with that one? And if it's a holistic solution that integrated works together and solves that problem, that's the story I think you want to tell in your proposal is what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the operational context and how it makes a difference? And how do these software and hardware pieces come together to transform or change the way we think about that problem? Yeah, so do it together. Yeah. Yeah.
I need this as well.
Good afternoon, Karen Wallen, CGI. Question about the submissions. When you're looking at cost quals, do you consider international implementations as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is a global ecosystem, transportation security. You know, we have the largest enterprise in the world, but there are many other operators out there. And I think an operationally relevant environment is important to mention. I was going to give Mr. Parker a hard time when he was talking about theft, right? Often innovation is the reapplication of a concept. And so I don't think there's really good kind of theft in innovation, more it's just reapplication and expansion of the appliance of that solution. So anything that's operationally suitable, I think is relevant. Any questions? Well, thank you. We'll pass it back to Mr. Cota to close us out. Thanks.
Okay, we can go ahead to the next slide. Yeah, so I mean, that is essentially it for the day. Just a reminder, closed on the 17th. I think we have the cutoff there for questions there. Yeah, September 27th. Again, there's two different email boxes that you guys can use. The first one is idea@tsa.dhs.gov. And then the other one is the Innovation Task Force at tsa.dhs.gov. That one reaches obviously into us directly. The ideal one is the one that we tie more directly with the BAA, but you can use either to reach out to us directly. So with that, we really appreciate everyone's attendance today. We hope you all get home safe. So thank you so much.